What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. This week we're back on our twin turbo Chevelle. The last time you saw it, we fabricated a full exhaust, and it's finally time to chip away at our small list to get this thing fired up, right?
A lot of the people, it's not a small list.
Well, I mean, right now it's a small list. I'm sure there's some more things we're gonna add, but this is what we need to do to get it started. We're gonna go ahead and get that exhaust piping that's sitting very close to our fuel tank wrapped. We have a couple fuel lines to put back on. We got some coolant lines to finish up, and fluids. We gotta fill it with fluids. All this other stuff we don't really need to do to get it started. As a matter of fact, we're gonna leave off our fenders, our inner fenders and our outer fenders in the front. That way we have, full access to anything that may be leaking. I don't think it will, but just in case, right?
Yeah, we got a lot of exhaust piping and a lot of different connections that we have to monitor and make sure that they're 100% before we can call everything good to go. Fluid checks on all the vitals, talking transmission, engine oil, rear differential oil, power steering fluid, everything else that's essential. We're gonna prime the engine before we start it because it's been sitting dry for 2 years or so. Never been started before, so we're gonna make sure that's solid, so take care of our bearings so we don't ruin them. All the preliminary checks before you start an engine. So we're gonna get going, check off that list, knock it all out.
All right. So if you guys have never done a first startup on a brand new motor, sit back. This is gonna be a good episode for you. So let's get this car back up in the air and start chipping away.
All right, while Mike's got the exhaust off, wrapping up those pipes, you can also notice after he's done with the exhaust, there's a little bit of a close call with some of the fuel components. I don't know if you can see up there, there's a big Y where our two fuel pumps join, and our exhaust system gets pretty close right there to the return line and the feed lines. So I'm gonna go ahead and add some heat protection above those guys so we can keep that under control. To do that, we have this really cool 7-layer perforated heat resistant material. It's pretty cool, it's universal. You can cut it up, put it in different places on the car. You can see here I've got a piece that I cut out already. Went ahead and bent it in the shape that I needed to get it, and you can see this guy is pretty malleable, and we're gonna put this guy right up above the axle. Slide this guy up. You see she's gonna fit in there just like this, and we'll be able to bolt it in using those two inserted nuts. Boom, bolt it in there. Yeah, that'll give protection to our merge connection for our fuel system. It's very important. Don't let your fuel get heat soaked. It'll dissipate all of your horsepower, and it's also not safe. Once you get a lot of heat in the fuel tank, that'll also make this stuff vaporize a lot faster. So if you didn't have a large vent, like in this case we have a massive 3/4 inch vent, you can run into all kinds of fuel problems. You'll get run into vapor lock and the fuel will start boiling. We're trying to do our best to keep the heat away from the tank and keep the power up. Got a nice layer of protection there now. Thumbs up on that.
We are gonna go ahead and do a little heat protection around our exhaust pipe over here on the passenger side, where it is super close to our regulator and this sensor here. So we're gonna take some of that 6-layer heat protection, I'm gonna cut it up, and we're gonna wrap it around the pipe here with some clamps and just protect this sensor from getting cooked.
All right, next step in getting all the fluids into the car, we're gonna go ahead and seal up our rear differential. Yes, we are gonna put oil in it. Leave differential fluid out of one car and then the internet just lights you on fire. So we're definitely putting oil in the differential and a brand new gasket, and then we'll move on to getting stuff in the engine. moving along, getting closer and closer to getting the Chevelle fired up. Just put 5 gallons of 93 octane in here just to get started. We are utilizing a flex fuel sensor down here, so we will be able to use ethanol. But for now, first startup, we're just gonna use 93. Just finished reinstalling the wires for our fuel pumps. They are gonna be staged. We'll be running one for the initial fuel pressure, and then as it builds boost, the second one will come on. Running both pumps all the time is never the best thing. If you can avoid it, creates more heat in the fuel tank and warms up the fuels. Next thing we're gonna do is prime the engine with engine oil. To do that, what we're gonna be doing is using a pressurized tank. We're gonna add some oil into here, pressurize it with the shop air, and I have a dash 4 1/4-inch line here, stainless steel line, running into the engine. We have our turbo oil feed coming out of the side of the block there. So I'm gonna pull one of the lines off, put this braided line on here, and that's how we'll introduce oil pressure into the system. And we're gonna do that first, get some oil coated on all the bearings, and then we'll go ahead and start cranking it without the fuel system connected. So we could just get this started or turn everything over without it firing. We'll wait to see oil pressure from the oil pressure sensor. And then once that happens, then we'll be safe to start. We'll reconnect everything for the fuel system and the ignition system again, and then we'll be able to start it for the first time. We got our oil pressure here so we can monitor that, and we'll go ahead and see if we can get a reading on it. I'll just go ahead and crack this guy open. Oh, we got pressure. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Now we're going. So our sensor is seeing pressure, which is good. So I'll let this deplete all the pressure in here. After that's all pushed into the engine, then we'll go ahead and run the starter, get the pump primed up. So all this is just to make sure that we have a startup with plenty of lubrication on the engine. Never want to miss out on these steps because, man, you can ruin an engine on the first start. On the turbocharged application, I'm also going to let oil flow into our turbochargers before we get the compressor wheel spinning. We're gonna now double check that there's engine oil in it. We'll check the dipstick, make sure there's a decent amount, add the full capacity to the engine, and then we'll go ahead and cycle the starter, get our pressure going, and then after that, should be able to fire it up. Engine oil pressure. Priming. So that's a success. I would call that a successful prime.
All right, guys, before we get the Chevelle started up, we're gonna take a break to talk about this week's sponsor, Gator Coolers. We partnered up with Gator Coolers this week to help you guys get a chance to win your very own 20-gallon cooler with a custom Salvage Savage cooler pad.
All you have to do to enter is go to the Salvage Savage website, pick up one of these badass tumblers, and you are entered to win.
All right, now let's get this Chevelle started up.
Yesterday we finished filling up all the fluids in the engine. I primed the engine, made sure all the bearings are coated with nice oil, and we're ready for a smooth start. Just this morning I went ahead and made sure that our wastegates were completely assembled. Everything's tight now. Double check that we have the proper spring. Right now we're starting out with a 7-pound spring. It should be able to get us to where we want as far as our target. I honestly don't think we're gonna make more than 12 pounds max on this thing. And I'm sure with that number, we'll do well over 800. And that's our goal. We don't wanna break the transmission. But enough of that. We're gonna start this thing up this morning. We're gonna monitor everything with the Haltech NSP software. We're gonna take some data logs, and hopefully we can get this thing to start. I know that tuning with these dual throttle bodies can sometimes be extremely tricky. So we'll see how far we can get, and hopefully we can get it running. I've also gone through and already calibrated all of our sensors. There's a lot of calibration to do as far as setting up for your sensors. Luckily with us, we didn't have to do too much guessing. All the sensors we're using are Haltech sensors. So it's basically pretty much pick and choose in some of the menus and set the scaling, and you're pretty much ready to go. Firing order for this particular engine is set. With all that stuff out of the way, making sure everything is checked and double checked and triple checked, I think it's ready to fire this thing up. Ready?
Ready, Freddy.
Oops.
She wants to. Come on, girl.
Why is that? That ain't right. All right, so the engine's not gonna fire. Problem with our cam or crank sensor, potentially pinning of the sensor. We'll take a look and then we'll go back to trying again.
All right, well, Andrew is working on the first little problem with possibly some sensors. I also noticed a bunch of smoke coming out of this V-band right here. So I'm gonna take it off, make sure everything's set correctly before I just tighten her down a little bit more. Visibly, it looks fine, but let's check it out. Oh, come on, little girlie. So what you got going on there, Drew?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm looking at the playback log, or trying to, but for some reason it doesn't want to open up.
Back here, Kyle? Yeah. By the way, guys, that's where Kyle sits, back there. Now, these fans are not working here. Oh, my goodness. I think we may have to do something different, bro.
So we got her fired up. As you saw initially, didn't want to crank over. We had a lot of fuel in it. Typically, Haltech's motto is page up for power, but I had to page down a bunch because this thing was just way too much fuel. I pulled probably 40% of the fuel that I was giving out of it just to get it to idle. Obviously the idle was surging and stuff. We still got to trim all that stuff out, but we got the engine running, which is pretty good. And then hopefully we can get somebody behind the keyboard who can get this thing dialed in 100% for us. And we're gonna go ahead and just look over the engine. Do see a couple of little leaks. So saw one of the oil filter fittings is leaking over here, and there's another small leak here, which is, I'm assuming, the oil line coming out over there. So we'll take a look at that and fix that before we continue. And then we gotta air out the shop because it's pretty smoky. All right, next up, we gotta fill our DCT transmission up with some fluid. We got a bunch of fluids provided for us by Techniclock Racing. That's where we purchased our DCT, and that's where they did the mechatronic install, and they provided us with all this fluid. So we're gonna put all that stuff in there. We don't have a drive shaft yet, so we're not gonna be moving this thing, but as soon as we get the drive shaft in, which I hope is gonna be here very shortly, we can get this thing rolling and driving.
That is a wrap on the Chevelle's first startup. We got fluid in our transmission and our radiator. I hope you guys were excited as we were, because let me tell you, man, it was a big milestone. As you see behind me, the Chevelle's got its hood on it, it's got its front fenders, it's got all the goodies back on it. Next week, we're gonna be showing you guys that final assembly, as well as getting the Chevelle off the lift, into the trailer, and all the way down south to Miami, because we're gonna be getting on the dyno. So if you guys like the way this exhaust sounds, make sure you're tuned in for next week. Strap on that seatbelt because we're gonna be giving this thing a third of the beans. Andrew said, don't tell him all the beans because we're not giving it all the beans. Right, Andrew?
Yeah, we don't want to break it.
How many beans are we giving it?
About 800 beans.
About 800 beans, man. That's a good amount of beans. So make sure you guys are subscribed. Make sure you guys are following along. And don't forget, hit our merch store. Buy yourself one of these rad tumblers and win a chance to get that cooler, so you keep your bevies cold this summer. Oh yeah, and while I'm standing here, What do you guys think about this black hood, man? We're kind of on the fence with it. Looks a little unfinished. We're not really sure if we should add some red rally stripes on it, or Andrew likes the red stripe, or maybe we bring this red over to here and leave the center black. We're not really sure. So let us know what you think. Drop your suggestion in the comments below. We'll see you guys next week. Thanks for watching. Peace.